185 Miles South, a hardcore punk rock podcast.
What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we have Brad Logan of Leftover Crack. Helping out, it is Ben Edge and episode 1, the legend Joe Rivas. Kick us off, Ben.
Well, I think we're going to talk to Brad a little bit because he has a lot of exciting shit going on in his life right now. Brad, we met. When did we meet? We met in probably the end of the 90s when you were in the band Fminus.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be accurate.
All right. But
real quick, Brad, how punishing was Ben back in those days?
Ben was awesome, actually. And I believe you were in Field. Were you in Fields of Fire, or was there another? Yeah, it was Fields of Fire.
That's right. Yep, that was the band I was singing for at the time. We did a bunch of shows together at that time, and then yeah.
His optimism was a source of constant wonder for me.
As well as the sideburns, constant wonder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he had sideburns. He didn't have sideburns then.
Okay, right on. All right, Ben. Sorry to cut in. Kick it off.
I don't know that much about you, Brad, despite having known you for over 20 years. So tell us, firstly, where you grew up and how you got into punk music.
I grew up in Huntington Beach, California. I wasn't born here. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, but my family moved to HB in the early 70s. But I am conscious of some parts of my life that date back to being a child in Arizona. Most specifically, just the excruciating, crushing, punishing heat, and just dust, you know? So I grew up here. I grew up in Huntington Beach. And what was the second question? How did I get into punk music?
Yeah, how'd you get into Yeah.
You know, it was by, I was in close proximity to other people who were getting into punk music. I think that my friends and I, when we were in probably 7th or 8th grade, stumbled upon Rodney on the Rock. And we were conscious of, because we were like, rock fans, and we were into, all the sort of big bands of when I was in grade school, it was like mid 70s or something, late 70s. So we were all into Zeppelin and Sabbath and, all that kind of stuff. But we had heard of the Sex Pistols and other bands, The Damned and, Dead Boys and stuff through, like just picking up the rock magazines that we would grab every week from 7-Eleven, and Cream and Rock Scene. I remember getting my hands on and just being like, just blown away, aghast at like, oh my God, look how crazy these guys look. What the fuck is going on in England and in New York? And then so I remember stumbling upon Rodney on the Rock, and we weren't like part of any scene, we were just little kids, right? I think I had been to one concert, maybe Elton. My first concert was Elton John at Dodger Stadium. I was a little, I was like 10 or 11 and I'd been to Black Sabbath and Van Halen at Anaheim Stadium. And Kiss at Anaheim Stadium. But, no gigs or any, clubs or anything like that. But I remember specifically stumbling upon, my parents had this like stereo record player, 8-track player, all in one combo that sat in the living room of our house. And they would let me listen to it occasionally, right? Like, okay, you can just, they're doing, off in the kitchen or doing whatever they were doing. And Sunday night was one of my nights, and I was just flipping through the channels and stumbled upon Rodney on the Rock. And that was really the first place that I got to hear the Pistols and, all of those first wave sort of bands. And I was just like freaked out. It was like, oh my God, these guys sound exactly what they look like, it sound like they look. And, but it was, it was a few years before, I guess the defining aspect was cutting my hair, right. And cutting and dyeing my hair. So it was a few years before I would do that. And I did go to some shows, early on and because I had, this is probably a way longer answer than you guys want. So you can just shut me down at any time.
Keep going, man. It's cool.
Feel free to just bring the hammer down,
Just
like
roll with it, man.
Old guy fucking rants,
No, we're vibing. Keep going.
Okay. So I had some friends who lived, in the track across the street from me. I was in suburban Huntington Beach, and they lived in the track across the street, and we went to the same school. And these guys moved down here from Pasadena, and their roommate was a guy who was a doorman at the Whiskey a Go-Go in Hollywood. And he would take us up there with him on, he'd be like, hey, there's a show going on tonight. I'm going to work. You guys want to come along? And so it would be like 5 of us, there were 3 brothers, who moved down from Pasadena, and then, a couple other friends of ours, and we would pile in this dude's van. He would take us up to the Whiskey, and we'd get walk past the line of like these hipsters, these little fucking kids, and he would let us in early. And at that time they had 2 shows a night. They had an 8 and 11, and we'd have to stay for both shows, and they'd clear out the club after the first show, and they'd have to hide us upstairs backstage. And so I was privy to all of this sort of like, I guess, early scene stuff, but, I wasn't aware of how like, the impact hadn't been felt yet. And it was just like, it was just a thing, but I remember, we went to see, the Weirdos, and I think the Weirdos in Shock, one night. And then,
what year would that have been?
Probably 78. I want to say,
yeah.
But I wasn't a punk, right? We weren't punks. We were just kids, right? We hadn't even defined ourselves as anything, right? And I remember, but these stick out. These are vivid because it was my first exposure to any of this stuff, and so I remember the Weirdos in Shock in their fucking heyday, I want to say, and Suicide Commandos we saw, Judas Priest we saw, Ramones. Christmas night, we saw the Ramones of like, Road to Ruin tour, whatever year, 78, probably, maybe that was 79. And then other rocker shit, like, God, what's that band? Not 10 Years After, one of those kind of like, those like, bluesy kind of, we'd see shit like that too. But, and so I wasn't, I was like, wow, this stuff is amazing. I was all in with the Ramones. I was like, the Ramones, I have the fucking shirt, I got the records, I'm down. I was all in with Judas Priest, fucking down. It was still that was like, I didn't buy in and really cut my hair until a couple of years later, and prior to that, I discovered the Germs and Black Flag and was going up to LA, being dragged up to LA by my friends who were punks. In the late 70s, and to see, bands up there and going up with long hair in those days was kind of a, was a dangerous policy, and maybe not so much in Hollywood, but going to anything around Orange County was wasn't the smartest idea. And there were very clearly, clear lines drawn behind, but the rockers and the punks, right. And us versus them, and at least to me anyways. And so I got into all these bands before I actually, made the jump. And then when I, cut my hair, I was like all in and just started going to all the shows and, anything I could get my hands on. I didn't have a car. So a lot of times there would, and it was probably the same for you, Ben, everybody just piles into somebody's fucking car. We throw some gas in and we drive up to LA with no idea of how we're going to get in. Nobody had any money. It's like, if we had any money, it went to beer. It's like, yeah, we're just going to this thing and we're just going to figure out a way in, and sometimes we all got in together. Sometimes it was every man for himself. Sometimes we never even made it into the show. We just hung out in the parking lot and drank and talked shit because, the parking lot was its own scene. Right. And so, does that answer that question? I don't even know.
No, It totally does. Do you have standout memories of any early shows like that are vivid, or does it all kind of just run together?
Well, those ones that I mentioned at the Whiskey were extremely vivid. And then, it was like, okay, kids, go backstage and we're going to leave you in the care of the fucking Ramones while we clear out this crowd, and we were literally just, sharing the backstage with the Ramones and Judas Priest, and I remember UFO, who was another band that we were into, it's like the dudes from UFO were there, but they didn't care. I mean, we were little kids. They were just like, oh my God, look at these fucking guys running around, I remember giving Joey Ramone $1 bill to sign and he stuck it in his pocket, that one, like, but some of the early, punk shows that I was seeing, post, hair was, God, that's kind of all a fucking blur, really. I just went to so many and a lot of it's fuzzy. And I count not getting in as going to the show too, but some of the bands that I saw were, the Circle Jerks were insane. Fear, Black Flag.
How many different singers did you see of Black Flag?
I only saw the Henry Rollins Black Flag, but
right on.
It was Damaged era.
Right. Brad, how do you make the transition from being like a participant to wanting to do your own band? And what is the first band that you start?
I got drafted into this band called the Ozzy Heroes, which was Mark Alba, Tony Alba's brother, and Emil, who was later in Black Flag, was the drummer of that band. And I took the place of Margo from the Go-Go's, who was the guitarist. And this kid named Lane Stays. And they were just scene kids. Right. And Marco had left and I was just drafted in. I think it was Margo. Maybe there was another guy, the guy from the 3 o'clock, Greg. Maybe I took his place, but I was in good company, right? They were, both just insanely, amazing guitarists. And I remember Mark, just going, well, you can play guitar. You want to join my band? And I was like, sure. And so they were, the Ozzy Hairs were like the Germs, I want to say. And, it was hardcore and it was in that fashion. And Dez from Black Flag actually was the second guitarist for a few shows. So it was the two of us. And my first show with that band was at I believe it was at the Whiskey a Go-Go, opening for UXA. And I was so nervous, and we all ate like acid and mushrooms and I drank myself blind, it was just out of nervousness. So by the time I got on stage, I was too drunk to play, but then the mushrooms kicked in and it just shit got weird. Right. And I talk about it in the book that Architects of Self-Destruction and I ended up freaking out and leaving all my gear on stage and just running out of the whiskey, like, confusion and, all my gear got clipped and it was a great time, really, that was my introduction into welcome to your first band, and always keep your eye on your guitar. Don't
Yeah,
ever
no pressure playing with Dez, huh?
Well, Dez was just really fucking cool. He was a fucking punk, and he was like Dez from Black Flag, but he wasn't like, bands around that time, they all hung out, they would hang out at the, outside the gigs and all those guys and the Circle Jerks guys. And there was like a punk house and not too far from there called the Oxford House. And guys like Pat Smear and I mean, these were guys that were, and women, they were just part of the scene. Right. So I was enamored because I was fans of their band. It was like, oh fuck, there's Keith Morris, and but they weren't dicks. Everybody was like cool. They had already been hanging out and on a street level for a few years, and Dez was great, man. He was a great guitar player and just a fucked guy, man. He was awesome.
So tell me about you. There's like a big gap in your involvement in punk between the early 80s and maybe somewhere in the mid 90s
to the early 90s. Yeah, I would say, without going too much into it, or I guess I can, depending on what you guys want to talk about, about probably 85 or 86, I became hopelessly addicted to narcotics and dropped out of the scene entirely. For that reason, it became, addicted to narcotics in the sense of it becoming a lifestyle. Right. And, I just couldn't make it to the gigs anymore, and I was too strung out and hustling to, to support that lifestyle became a full-time job. So that's what I did. And occasionally I'd pop my head into shows, but mostly I was just running in the, extreme underground of that lifestyle. Just, sleazy motels and jails and shit like that. So, I didn't think I was going to survive it, but, by the early 90s, 92, 93, a way out was presented to me and I took it, of that way of life. And I didn't think I would ever be in a band ever again. I was just a happy to be alive kind of guy, so I started ducking into shows again and a lot had changed between the mid 80s and in the early 90s. But, and I followed bands too, because in those periods, in that late 80s period, I would, go shoplift, records and cassettes from music stores and
Yeah.
kind of stay up on what was going on. But, I was into really, and I don't know if, I got into the sort of that post-punk scene of like, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and Einstürzende Neubauten and that era of, Lydia Lunch and stuff like that, whatever you want to term that era, Fetus and so I was kind of, that was kind of the stuff I was listening to, though I did, I remember popping up at a Bad Religion show and it was probably No Control era, whatever. When was that? Do you guys know?
89.
So I popped into that and it was like, holy shit. I remember seeing them in the mid 80s. It seemed like they would be on every show, in Godzilla's or the Whiskey or wherever. And they were cool, but I wasn't really a fan, it was just kind of, in my opinion, their music in the early part of their career was, and I'm sure you would agree, was a lot different than what started happening around Suffer, No Control, Against the Grain, right?
100%.
Which was like the triumvirate of, for me, the rebirth of my interest in punk rock. It was like, I was kind of burned out on it by then, you know, and it was like, fuck, man, this stuff is, you know, this is and all of the, you know, I went to the Palladium to see him, and they were, you know, on Epitaph, you know, an independent label, and they were not above ground at all. And you know, it was fucking sold out. Right. And I remember being like, really attracted to that too, that they were doing it on their own terms, you know, without any connection to, you know, a major label hype machine, you know, and they refined their sound, but not in a commercial way, you know, or like, you know, they didn't cheapen their sound, right? It was just like, and to me, nothing like that had been done before, you know, except, you know, there was some catchy punk, Husker Du and you know, Naked Ray Gun or whatever. But I think those guys really, you know, hit the fucking nail on the head, at least in LA in that period, you know, at that time.
There's no formula to Suffer. That's like brand new and wacko.
Yeah. Right. I hadn't
100%.
heard anything like that, you know, like that catchy, you know, with, you know, lyrics that were intelligent and thoughtful, you know, with that much force. It was like all the awesome elements, right?
Yeah, 100%. And the song structure is a little different. Like there's popular bands before, but they're following the same song structure. And yeah, Suffer is just wild. Brad, you get into like roadieing in the early 90s. How does that come about?
That was again by just, you know, I just stumbled into it. I had you know, once I got clean, you know, I had no jobs, no job skills unless you consider, you know, burglary a job skill. I was so I started I had some friends, you know, from the scene who you know, were working, you know, in for Golden Voice and in production and you know, I'm like, God, I should really get a job. And they were like, you know, well, you know, you want to work these shows and help, you know, set up these shows. And that's what I started doing, you know, working for Golden Voice in you know, the early mid 90s. And it was the perfect job for me because, you know, I found that I loved going to shows and I loved seeing anything and everything. You know, it was just a sponge. I'd been, you know, I'd been underground for so long. I was just a sponge for anything. And there was a lot of good music around that period. And so, you know, I was working at the Palladium, the Palace, the, you know, Whiskey, Roxy, wherever the case may be. And I was going to this club Bogarts a lot too, which was in Long Beach. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Bogarts. It was 21 and up, but they had all the touring bands would come through. I think, you know, the Jesus Lizard there, you know, Bad Seeds played there. And I had a friend who was a waitress and she would just get me into anything. I had no fucking money. And I would go to anything. But anyways, so working production, I ended up making friends with a guy who was the guitar tech for Pennywise, Rancid, and Offspring, like all three of them. His name was Dave Reese, and you know, because they would come through, you know, all the time, and you know, he was a cool guy, and their crews were cool dudes, and he just called me out of the blue. I think I might have said to him, "Hey, if you ever need a guitar tech for anything, you know, let me know." And some time went by, and I just got this random call from Germany one day, and on my voice, you know, on my landline telephone with a fucking voice, you know, recorder message machine, and it was like, "Hey, you know, Rancid needs a guitar tech. You interested?" I was like, "What?" And so I called him back in Germany, you know, and I had no experience other than I knew how to tune guitars and play guitars and was a punk, you know, and that was apparently good enough. And so it's like, cool, we'll try you out, you know, I did my first show with them, and I didn't know the band was in Seattle, right after When Out Come the Wolves came out, and I was already a fan of the band, but I didn't know them. I'd seen them play and had those records and we hit it off. I got along with those guys and so they asked me to stay on and I stayed with them for about 5 years, maybe more. And then would take side jobs in between their tours and, started working for other bands and really that's how that, gig is, just word of mouth. Yeah. We're looking for a, tour manager, guitar guy or drum guy or whatever. Oh, well, ask so-and-so. And that's how I did that. And that, again, I never thought I would end up playing again. I was just happy to tune guitars, and watch bands and get paid for it. That was like, I'd made it. That was the pinnacle, it's like, didn't get any better. Right.
What was that time like though? Cause like you're with Rancid, they're blowing up, like the punk explosion is like in full force. Like, is this just mind blowing to you since you've been there kind of pretty close to the beginning and you'd seen like ebbs and flows? Like, what was this like, you experiencing this crazy explosion?
It was mind blowing. And but to me, I thought that it was, that these bands deserved this kind of attention, and like, same with like Nirvana, and who really kind of opened the floodgates, I think. And cause prior to that, it was like, what did you have? You had fucking hair metal, Sunset Strip hair metal, which was horrifying. Decline of Western Civilization Part 2. Right. And that was reality, man.
Great flick though. Great flick.
It's the best one. Hands down the fucking best one. Amazing. Yeah. But so you had that, and you had just like really horrible, like MTV 120 minutes, just poppy, just, fucking garbage, not hitting the mark, as far as I was concerned. And the bands that I thought were great, the Bad Seeds, Neubauten, stuff like that, was just getting zero fucking attention, and so, but I had, a wide berth, man. I mean, I liked a lot of different stuff. And so when, the Epitaph bands, of that era, started to blow up, to me, it was, Rancid was my favorite. And, I was like, oh yeah, better these guys than, I don't know, whatever was,
anybody.
Better,
that LP's so good, right? It's like better them than anybody. Everyone else, go fuck yourself.
Any of this other fucking bullshit,
Right.
And so, cause, I knew those guys and they were like, they came from the fucking shit, and, so it was exciting, and I was, and I felt that the band was fighting the good fight, to provide quality music to the world, and to the people, and it was total chaos, man. I mean, which is an arena that I'm totally comfortable in, so it was great.
Yeah. Ben has a question here. He says, are there any wild stories from the road? And did you have any threesomes?
With Rancid?
No, just on the road. It's a gag question from Ben, I believe. Ben, you weren't serious, were you?
I was serious about the first part, which is wild stories being on the road with Rancid or any other bands from that time when you were a roadie, when you were primarily a roadie, like just things that stuck in your mind. It's like, wow, that was a crazy night. I don't mean sex. I mean, it could be, but could be anything.
Yeah, but also Ben wants to know the second part because he took his pants off back when you said that you saw the Weirdos in '78 at the Whiskey.
As he should have, as he should have. I don't kiss and tell, but I will talk about the first part. And
good man.
It's funny because a lot of what would seem, what you could label as crazy is just so commonplace, right? To me that I didn't see it as crazy. And that could be said for a lot of the things I've been through in my life. Right. And I've always lived there, I've always lived in the fucking chaos, and for better or for worse. And one thing that pops up is I remember, when Rancid got down to Florida, that there was like this beef with these these racist skins down there, and he showed up to this one show, and it might have been in St. Pete or something, or Tampa, and we had this big standoff like on the street, man, and where there was like 15 of their guys. This was after the show. And then all of the band and the crew, and we were out on the street ready to go fucking toe to toe, and I'm not a badass, man. That wasn't something I was really interested in doing, getting knifed. It's like, fuck, man, I'm just tuning guitars here. I'm just a punk fan, but they came and they were threatening the band, and which meant they were threatening us, because the band were our friends, and so we fucking stood out there, man, and we were ready to go for it. And I would have if it had come to that, and I would have taken whatever lumps were coming to me, but it was diffused somehow. Maybe Lars diffused it, or somebody. I don't remember how it didn't happen. But it was pretty fucking tense for a minute, and I thought that was going to be not good. That one stands out.
Right on.
All of the other kind of stuff while I was roadieing. I mean, I think that all of the crazy people and that were around us and attracted to us, and attracted to that setting, and the fans, and it was just a different era. It was a different era. This was pre, not a better era, just different, right? It was pre, internet and cell phones even, and so everything was like in fucking real time, and right here, right now, so there was a lot of crazy things that happened, but nothing that really stands out. I guess traveling places was insane to me. I never thought I would leave, my hometown. I just didn't, when I was, strung out on dope, I didn't leave, and so going anywhere was just insane to me. Going to like Japan or Australia to Europe was like, I might as well have been going to fucking Mars. I never thought I would ever go to these places.
Right. And it's also a wild time because like things are taking off and these bands are huge, but it's like you didn't see this coming, right? Like, and it's like the first time of them being huge. So it's like this wildness of an explosion, right?
There was
like
no way you could have ever laid money down that any of these bands would have gotten huge, and to me, yeah, so that was, and the band was on, these guys were from the same places that I was from, you know what I mean? Punk gigs, fucking house gigs, shit bill. And now they're on bills with like, the Beastie Boys or the Foo Fighters or Rage Against the Machine, who were, enormous. I mean, I guess you could have put money down that Rage Against the Machine would have been huge, because I always liked that band, and I know that they're sort of a polarizing band, but, they were on those bills, and it was just, playing festivals where Sting was, Robert Plant and Jimmy Page were the headline. It was just like, it was fucking laughable, right? Like, how are we here? This is crazy. But at the same time, it filled that need in me to absorb everything, all music and all things music related. I'd been, the only thing I ever cared about in my life was all of those, all the music, you know what I mean? So it was like I was a kid in a fucking candy store.
So at around this time, two things happen. You form the band Fminus, and then Tim Armstrong from Rancid forms the record label Hellcat, and then you end up being Fminus ends up being the first band on Hellcat. So how did that come about, and what else did you do? You were involved in Hellcat as an employee as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Fminus came about. Tim really pushed me into starting a band again, right? And I would play. I'd be playing guitar after their sound checks or whatever, on their gear, and we just would, became friends, and we would just have conversations, and he would ask me, "Were you ever in any bands?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I did this and that." And so how come you don't play anymore? I'm like, I don't play anymore. That was then, and this is now, and so do you want to play? I'm like, fuck, well, yeah, but didn't really have any self confidence, and he just kept hammering at me, shit, you need to start a band, Logan. You need to start a fucking band. And he never let up on me until I was like, fucking what? I'm going to start a band, and, I put together, the beginnings of Fminus, and we played a couple shows, and he was like our biggest fan. And he was like, I'm starting this label, and I want to do a record with you guys, and he had a bunch of bands he wanted to do records with, and he couldn't believe he wanted to do a record with us. I thought we were just like, I loved us, but I thought we were also at the same time really fucking stupid, so I was pretty excited because I'd never made a record, let alone for a subsidiary of Epitaph, but I think, there was a purity to us in our we were just so green, right? And we didn't have any agenda, we didn't want to be anything. We didn't want, we weren't trying to go to, obviously playing that kind of music, it's like, where we fucking, we headed straight for the top. I don't think so, and we were just doing, what felt like, what I felt like inside, and it was giving voice to that. And also it was giving, we were playing stuff that we weren't seeing around LA at that particular period of time, a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, you were around then too. I mean,
yeah, Fminus was like brutally fast hardcore, but not in that kind of grindcore power violence way, like traditional hardcore, but as hard and as fast as you can play traditional hardcore. That's the way I would describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. We were
Yeah, Brad, was that like, was that on purpose to be that fast, or was it kind of like a happy accident when you're jamming and you're like, oh shit, our drummer can do it?
No, it was on purpose to be that fast. I mean, we're, I was taking cues from the bands that I liked as a kid, and the simplicity of it, which I felt was lacking at that period, just the the pureness and the simplicity of it, and you didn't, the lack of anything that would resemble melody and finesse, and just pure fucking impact, quote unquote, and I wasn't seeing that. It may have been around, but there were grindcore bands and there were people playing extremely gnarly things, but there was nothing that was just pure hardcore. I don't know if you want to call it. I'm reluctant to use old school as genre, or anything, but taking cues from that, because we weren't trying to be, maybe I was trying to be some of those bands, but it never came out sounding like the bands that I liked, It's like, fuck, I want to be the Circle Jerks, and we didn't sound like the Circle Jerks, I wanted to be negative. I wanted to be Negative Approach, and AF and Discharge, and but I just couldn't get it right,
Yeah, you guys were really original sounding, and you had Jennifer and Erica in the band doing vocals, and that was kind of unique in and of itself.
Right. And that came about, organically too. I mean, it was like, I was the singer at first and, it was just like, I'm singing everything. And, I was just like, fuck, well, Jennifer, why don't you try one, And she was like, sure. She didn't give a fuck, and it was like, here's a song, write some lyrics to it. And then she did. And it was like, what? You're fucking amazing, and then, Sarah Lee was the first guitar player and she sung on some stuff too. And she was amazing. And then when Erica got in the band, we threw some stuff at her, and like I'd never heard her sing and, but she had the guts. Right. And but I still didn't know what it was going to be like. And like out of her fucking mouth came just this, like, this just from hell vocals that, she was, you know her, Ben, she was just very slight, and tiny. And it was like, fuck, where is that coming from? You are fucking amazing. You have to sing more. So, and it was just cooler to have everybody sing, Adam sang some too, we were like the fucking Beatles of shit rock, and it was like, but we just fuck with things, like, all right, you're going to sing this next one. And all three of us are going to sing, a White Collar Crime, and all four of us, and would, take turns doing it. And it was great, man. It was great fun. And there wasn't really, any rules other than, to hopefully provide something that would just turn people off.
Brad, is someone that's been there from the beginning or close to the beginning? We talk on the pod sometimes about, is there like a genre of punk that's in between like the original sound, like, talking about like the Weirdos or those early bands like at Seeing Him the Whiskey, and then like the hardcore stuff? Like, is Adolescence and other bands like that, do they fall into like a genre in between like first wave punk and hardcore?
It's funny. I was just thinking about that the other day, and why was I thinking about? I don't know. Maybe I was reading something, but yeah, there were definitely bands that bridged, the early scene and what became, I guess, hardcore to me. Were bands like the Adolescents and the Germs in particular, who came out of that early, art scene. But paved the way for, to me, that was the first grind, Darby was the first grindcore vocals, and nobody had ever, cared less about singing before. It was just like, it was fucking amazing. And so those two bands in particular, and even Black Flag, who, started before there was a hardcore scene, and, there was stuff going on in the East Coast, but I wasn't really paying attention to that. Middle Class too, was another band I never saw, but, that Out of Vogue's, I remember hearing that Out of Vogue 7-inch in, the late 70s and, maybe 1980, just being like, you can't do this. This is just like, fucking nobody does this. What the fuck is this?
Yeah, it's weirdo proto hardcore.
Yes, and it could be considered the amongst the first, defining. Doesn't sound anything like what is now, but it was just so like detached, and scared the shit out of me,
right. And there's one of those bands that I would put in that middle category. It came from your hometown, which is The Crowd.
Oh, The Crowd? Yeah.
And I didn't even know until recently you were in The Crowd in the late 90s. I mean, they were a band that started in the 70s, but what do you tell us about The Crowd?
Oh, I mean, I fucking love The Crowd. I mean, that I could go on and on what what they meant to me, and that Beach Boulevard record, in particular, and they were like, they fucking started pop punk, come on, them and the Buzzcocks, and to me at least,
Rad.
I hate that term pop punk, but and the Simpletones too, right? But yeah, I mean, they were just fucking legendary, and these were older guys than me, and they were big stars to me in my hometown, and I remember seeing them at shows, and they would play, they would pop up at anywhere around town, like the rec center, or some fucking apartment complex, and it was just every bit as meaningful to me as going to like some fucking arena show somewhere, and more meaningful. So yeah, the crowd too,
Yeah, Brad, we'll end on Leftover Crack in your book, but I want to talk about in 2018, Steve Soto passes away, and you start playing with the Adolescents. How does that come about? And then also, did you know Steve Soto? And if so, what kind of guy was he?
I did. I was friends with Steve for a lot of years, and he was another guy who, I would see around before I knew him, in adolescence era, and I just thought, oh my God, I can't even talk to this guy. There's the guy from the Adolescents. He's probably a fucking dick, and then I met him. I was working at this record label called Dr. Dream, and like sorting the mail or whatever the hell I was doing, and one of his bands was on that label, Joyride, and he would come in and hang out and kick it in the warehouse, with the other warehouse folks, and I'm just like, I got to meet him, and he was just the fucking nicest, funniest, down to earth, like nothing like I thought he would be, and he was punk royalty to me, and I'm like, and we became, fast friends, and shared many an in joke for a lot of years, and I can't say enough good stuff about the guy, and anybody that knew him knows, he just had a fucking heart of gold. It was one of the good ones, man. And so, I got a call, one day out of the blue from him, hey, Adolescents are going to the East Coast, and we're doing some shows out there. You want to come along and drive the van and sell merch. And I was in between tours of Leftover Crack, and I was like, fuck, sure, man. I'd love to. Sounded like a fucking great time. And so I did. They had a handful of shows, maybe 2 weeks worth of shows, a week maybe, I can't remember. And that's what I did. I rode around with them. Borrowed the van from Leftover Crack, and I shared a room with Steve every night. We were roommates, and we'd be up till 4 or 5 in the morning, just fucking giggling like a couple of fucking grade school kids talking shit, and laughing about stuff, and it was just, it was great, right? He was my fucking boy, and then they went home, and I stayed in New York City, and a couple days later, he passed away, and I saw it on Facebook. Somebody posted on Facebook, and R.I.P. Steve Soto, and I was like, what the fuck is this? I was just with him, 2 fucking days ago. Is this a fucking joke? And made some calls, and it was no joke, and it was incredibly, incredibly sad. And I remember thinking, what an honor it would be, though, to go out, like he did with his boots on, He was still playing shows. He never retired. He was still writing music. He was in like 5 fucking bands, he was a model to me of artistic integrity and just, doing it because he loved doing it. And like, that's for a musician, I think that's like best case scenario, is dying while, you're still in it.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, it's, so, I didn't hear, anything from the band until a couple months later, and they had, a bunch of things booked. Adolescents had a, European tour booked and like Riot Fest and some other shows. And they're like, Steve would want us to finish these out, which I completely agree. Steve was a warrior, right? And you keep going, you got gigs to do, you fucking do them, you don't cancel. And so they're like, you want to play bass? And, I was like, gosh, there's no way, man, come on, I thought about it for a bit, and I'm like, if you guys want me to, I would be happy, to honor Steve in that way. And it was, totally awkward for me, and I imagine for them as well, it's like, the one constant in the adolescence all those years was Steve. And now there's this fucking guy, in there. And so it was pretty intimidating for me. But I had, they gave me like 40 songs, like, all right, we leave for tour in 3 weeks, learn these fucking 50 songs or whatever. I was like, what? And there was nobody to show me these, his bass lines, which, the earlier stuff was a little easier to pick up, but, the later stuff was like, Jesus, man, and I would just labor over these songs, and still to this day, I'll hear them, they released a bunch of albums, in the incarnation that they're in now, and be like, oh God, I've been playing this wrong the whole time. It actually goes like this. But it was really intimidating. But, I'm not taking Steve's place. I'm, honoring the man and filling in for him and just trying to do, trying to be a fucking punker, and carry on in that tradition, which he was a punker, and to me, that's what he would want, somebody to go out there and give it their all and represent punk rock, which he was, that was in his fucking heart. Right. And so that's what I try and do, make the guy proud.
Yeah.
I don't know if it comes across that way. I'm not the, bass player that Steve was, but, and so after we did those shows, they were like, hey, we want to carry on and do more stuff. You interested? And I was like, fuck yeah. So that, that brought us to where we are now. And we did that covers record, Russian Spider Dump, which was recorded and mixed and dropped just in time for the shutting down of the world, but we got some shows coming up. We're doing like Halloween with Circle Jerks and Negative Approach, which to me is like, this all 3 of my dream bands, right?
Yeah.
That's where Fminus came from, right? So it's like, fuck,
that rules. Talk about you getting into Leftover Crack, and then also you have a book that's out now called Architects of Self-Destruction.
Yes.
Talk about both these things.
Leftover Crack was an accident, or maybe not an accident, but it was, I was working at Hellcat, right? And, and I talk about it in the book, but, I just kind of did, I would do whatever task was needed and a little bit of everything. And I didn't have a desk, with my name on it. Right. And so one of the gigs that I had was, Tim was like, hey, I want to sign this band. I want to do a record with this band. Choking Victim, and they're in the Lower East Side of New York somewhere. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go find these fuckers and convince them to, that this is the fucking, they're going to be stoked. Right. And so here's all I know is I have a phone number, on a crumpled like piece of paper, a bag or something, and go forth. And so I did. I went out to New York City, and long story short, I dug these guys up and on their turf, in their world, and which didn't freak me out because of where I came from. It was like it was comfortable in that element, and so, after, we did the Choking Victim record, and after that band sort of imploded, the singer, Sturgeon, wrote me, I don't know how long it was, maybe a year later or something, and was like, I'm going to put this new band together. I want to call it Leftover Crack. Here's a cassette tape of some demos I made. You want to play guitar? And, I was like, sure. I already had Fminus going, but I was a big fan of, the Choking Victim record and songs he sent on the tape I thought were great. And he was living in Montana at the time, and he came back, he got himself to LA and just put a band together of, all the heads that were around. It was me and Amory, who was the original Fminus drummer, and this guy, Mike Trujillo, who recorded was an engineer and recorded the Choking Victim record. Alec Bailey, who was his old friend from New York City and who was in Choking Victim with him, who had moved out to the West Coast. And we did some practices and then did a show at Headline Records. Were you at that show, Ben? I don't know if you were at that one.
I was not at that show.
Not that you would be.
I went to a lot of shows there. It was a good chance I would have been there, but I didn't go to that one.
Yeah. And so, there was like, 10 shoppers there and we played at like 4 PM and that was the first show. And so, it was kind of just one foot after the other. Right. And then cool, somebody wants to do a 7-inch with us and so we did a 7-inch and then I guess Sturgeon negotiated some record deals with a record deal with Epitaph Hellcat. And I was, I'd moved to New York City and I played a few shows in New York City with them. But I was like, at the time, Fminus, we put that record out and we stopped doing shows, we put that one record out and, Erica lived out in New York. Erica's from New York. And I remember talking to those guys and to her and it's like, hey, you guys want to, do some tours and maybe do another record and be a band again for a bit. And everybody was into it. So Erica had just moved to Los Angeles and I'm like, fuck it. I'm moving back to LA and I'm sorry, Leftover Crack, but you guys need to find another guitar player, which they did, and it was Ezra, who had played in Choking Victim and who's an amazing guitarist and musician and that was that. And then they came through town, Fminus started doing our thing and we were on tour constantly, for however long that was, the next 4 years or whatever. And mostly in Europe, and then Leftover Crack came through LA one time and I was just blown away. They were still going, and they had, Mediocre Generica was already out. I remember they recorded that in New York City with this, guy I hooked him up with, who was my, boss at the Bowery Ballroom, was this club I worked at. He had a studio in Midtown. And at any rate, I saw him play at the showcase and I'm like, fuck, you guys are fucking great, man. If you ever want another guitar player, let me know. I'd be down to rejoin. And, a month or two went by and, Sturgeon called me up and said, hey, remember that talk we had about you playing guitar? You want to do it? And I was in. And I figured, I could do 2 bands and also keep roadieing for other bands, which I was doing at the time too. I would take, I was making ends meet any way I could. Right. so I would do anything, and so how the book came about, was that one of your questions?
Yep.
The book came about probably the way that all these kind of books come about, like somebody in a fucking van on tour going, somebody ought to write a book about this shit, and that was it. Right. It's like, yeah, somebody ought to write a book about this shit. And, that was said one too many times. And I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to be the guy who writes the book about this shit. Nobody else seemed to want to take up the task. But, the history of that band was just, another level, the next level of chaos and insanity. But it was chaos and insanity to me while fighting the good fight. The good fight being, pushing forth ideals like, equality and gender equality, racial equality, real unity and a lot of times, having confrontations over that, with people that were not into those things. And again, with the Florida, right, in Florida and other places and getting death threats and people coming after us at shows and it was great fun. And it was, like I said, fighting the good fight. So some of the, so many crazy things that had never happened to me in a band or I'd never seen happen in a band setting were happening. And it's like, well, I'm going to try and document this so it took about 4 years from that, fucking light bulb in the van to, completing it, talking about it for 2 years, and then actually roped in John Gentili, who was an actual journalist and a guy who had experience, because I'm not a journalist, right? But I wanted to do it in the oral history format, which to me is my favorite, about any topic, because it's not, then you're not winding up with a press release, of like, if one person writes it, it's just my perspective, and I wanted to have everybody's perspective and people that were not in the band and I wanted all the contradictions in there because everybody sees things differently and that's reality. And I wanted the reader to be able to make up their mind, as how to, think about it, any certain topic. I didn't want to jam it down somebody's throat. This is how you should feel about this, and I don't know if that comes across in the book, but that was the idea. And, but there was like, so many people, we interviewed like 100 people and it's something that if I had been trying to do it myself, it would have driven me to, the fucking brink of mad, it ended up fucking Edgar Allan Poe madness, so I'd split up the, interviews with John and I would go, talk to these people and ask him this. And then sometimes he would say, why don't we talk to this person? Oh, that's a fucking great idea. Yes. Talk to that person too. And he had that license to bring ideas in
where can people buy this book? Where can they find it?
You can buy this book, it's all over the internets, you can buy it at rarebirdlit.com. You can go directly to the publisher for it. You can go, I know it's kind of expensive if you're out of the country and, Amazon has it. A couple other, I don't know. I don't have the list in front of me. A couple other
if you Google leftover crack book, it comes up with like a million different spots to buy it.
Yeah.
If you buy it from Amazon, that is heavy irony. So check yourself.
It is heavy irony. And, they're all plenty of alternatives to Amazon. I'm not pushing that by saying that it's on Amazon.
No, for sure. But it is easy sometimes, right?
Yes, I know.
And you can always just say it didn't show up and get your money back.
I know people in some other countries have written me saying their book either didn't show up or it was, twice the cost of the book to order from the States. And
right.
In some places it's like, well, fuck, that fucking blows. There is Amazon. I'm sorry, but there is Amazon, and until, the publisher really fleshes out those channels, that was what there was. Right. Really the only place I'm pushing is go to River Direct but now, like you said, there's a ton of alternatives. And I know I was presented with some later on that I passed on to some people in Europe that weren't, Amazon, but some places that's the only fucking thing there is,
Yeah. People are savvy. They'll figure it out.
Totally.
All right. Let's wrap this up with one question for Ben. Ben, do you forgive Brad for going to that other guy instead of asking you to help him with the book?
I do, because I don't think at the time Brad knew I was, in the middle of writing my own first book. So it's all good.
I didn't know this. And then Ben went, I'm writing this book on hip hop. I'm like, what?
Well, part 2, you know who to hit up. It's our man Bedge.
Absolutely.
I'm taking it back to the old school because I'm an old fool.
I'm taking it back to the old school because I'm an old fool.
Yo, what's up, motherfuckers? Old school.
Old school spotlight.
All right, we are going old school, and we're going to talk about the Social Distortion LP, Mommy's Little Monster. It came out in 1983 on 13th Floor Records. Hopefully, if Discogs did not do us wrong like it often does. Ben, what's your take on this record?
I love it. It's their best record by far. And if you go on Spotify right now and you look at their most listened to records, it's not even in the top 4, which is like a total shame. Because this is like that perfect, early 80s North Orange County punk that comes out of that whole scene that spawned Agent Orange and the Adolescents. Then, Rick Agnew is an original member of Social Distortion. Like they were all sort of intermingled, all those bands. And this is the classic for Social Distortion. I mean, you have Another State of Mind, which there's a funny story behind that. If you watch the documentary Another State of Mind, there's a scene where Mike Ness says, I wrote this new song I just wrote this new song on the road, and he plays it on the acoustic guitar. And it turns out that was kind of faked, and that they already had that song and they were already playing it on that tour at all those shows, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, fully faked. And if you go to the archives and listen to the Sean Stern interview, he talks about that.
Yeah. and like there's a certain vulnerability to Mike Ness's in his lyrics that carry through into the new, country-ish rock music that he does now. But I think there's something about his persona and his lyrics that really touch a lot of people's hearts, especially I think people who have damaged pasts. He went through a big drug phase, and I guess this would be in the midst of it, maybe, or before the really heavy shit happened to him. I always thought this record kind of should have been on Frontier. I guess 13th Floor might be they self-released it, or their manager put it out. I'm not sure what the story is behind that label, but there's nothing else on the label except for another Social Distortion record. I mean, All the Answers, Anti-Fashion, Mommy's Little Monster, every fucking song, virtually every song on this album is a classic. And you do hear the very beginnings of that kind of country kind of, there's a little bit of like cowboy country twang going on in there if you listen really closely.
Yes, before he became the Bruce Springsteen of Orange County. This thing still rages.
Yeah, they were the Rolling Stones of Orange County.
There you go. Brad, does this have a special place in your heart at all?
I have to say I agree with everything that you just said, Ben. And I mean, it's like, there's not a fucking losing tune on this record to me. And again, it's that, I think it's that purity of they had no expectations, right? And you know, you couldn't really go anywhere being a punk band back then, you know, you know, and Mike having the, you know, the past that he had, and it's all here, you know, and it's just fucking flawless to me. And I hate to be the fucking first record's the best guy, but this is their fucking best record, you know? And not, you know, not shitting on anything they've done after this, you know, I think they're a great band, you know, and still, you know, but this is like, yeah, I mean, this was my era, right? And I remember seeing them and just being blown away. They were just miles above a lot of bands that I was seeing at that period, you know. They had like, you know, because there was a lot of you know, a lot of generic sort of punk out there at that time, and a lot of it I did, you know, wasn't really into, you know, and but this was like, God, they have actual songs, you know, and it's not, you know, it wasn't poppy, you know, it was like, it just really struck me that they had actual fucking songs, and, you know, like the Clash or something, you know, but they were from around here, man, and they were fucking our guys, you know, and they were so good, and they were a mess, and they were so good, you know.
Yeah, they're not poppy, but there is like so many layers of melody on here, and it still is like of that era where all the recordings sound old school. It's really
yes,
yeah, it's something special. It's that mashup. It's still in the era where like the recording is like the fifth member in the band,
right?
Which makes it really special.
Yes, I love it. Yes, I love that too. You know, low fucking fi, and that wasn't even a thing. People weren't going for lo-fi. You know, nobody knew what they were doing. You know, and that's like magic, man, to me. So yeah, I'm 100% for this record.
Yeah, it's authentic. Joe, you love this record, don't you?
I absolutely love this record.
Yeah.
Go in.
Yeah, it you know, I'll agree with the other guys that every song on this record's a hit. Anti-Fashion might be like the weakest song, but it's still fantastic.
I love that song.
Yeah. You know, Roger has the mixing board that this is recorded on in his studio now. So our friend Roger.
Right. The same board gets used for this and Uniform Choice Screaming for Change. How about that?
Yep. You know, yeah, it's 13th Floor. I don't have a first press. I have the Time Bomb you know, gatefold LP version of it. I never had the original. I had the original 1945 12-inch, but not this record.
That's great too, and the Playpen one as well.
Yeah. Well, Playpen's on that.
Is it on the? It was a 7-inch too, though, wasn't it?
Maybe. I don't know about that. I have a 12-inch, and then I have the Hell Comes Your House, which has Lewd Boy and a live version of Telling Them.
Joe, what's the best Social D? Is it this or is it 1945?
Oh, it's this for sure. The 1945 stuff is good. And you know, when you were talking about or Brad was saying, I don't know who said it, that Rick was in this band, but so was Casey. So that's, you know, so that's why like the song 1945 is exactly is Amoeba. I mean, it's the exact same song with different lyrics. So, but it's fantastic. I love this record. And, you know, yeah, Mike's drug use, whatever, you know, influenced some of the stuff. And then he had some spats with the law, and then Prison Bound is like the cleanup, which is 88, I think, 89.
I don't think he was on the other side of all that. Well, you know,
not completely. Yeah.
Which is, you know, adds to the awesomeness of this, you know.
Yeah.
He was in it.
Yeah. Yeah, because he was definitely in it, because the mainliner 7-inch, you know, on Posh Boys, you know, prior to it, and that's absolutely about shooting heroin. So,
or just in that lifestyle, you know, of right, of the period, right.
Well, this LP is flawless. Like it's rad. So everyone check it out if you haven't. I know that the way that people look at Social D these days, it can be a mixed bag, but this record is undeniable. So, we talk a lot of hardcore on this podcast, but we like that old school LA and OC shit as well. So check this out if you haven't before. It's on all the streaming platforms. You know what to do. Handle business.
The fight lasts for hours, each ram battering the other dozens of times.
Head to head.
All right, we are going head to head. What we're doing is we're putting up the Angry Samoans LP, Back from Samoa, 1982. Bad Trip Records up against, good God, it's Fear the Record. And that's 1982 on Slash Records. This is a brutal matchup. Brad, what you got?
So what's the question? Which one's better? Is that it?
Yep. Which one's better, or which one do you like more? I mean, you could objectively say that one is better, but you like one more because it connects to you more.
Well, to be honest, when I was growing up, I didn't like either of them.
That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought that, the lyrics were corny, right. And I'm not a big guy on, like jokey type, stuff. And, to me, it was like, once I heard the fucking, GI, it's like, if you're not measuring up to fucking GI, like, I don't want to know you. And not that anybody does, but I'm still pondering those lyrics, 40 years later. And so that kind of, I thought the music is undeniable on both of those records, but Back from Samoa, Lights Out and, Coffin Case Steak Knife, that's like fucking LA hardcore, what became, I think. And the Fear record is like, the tempos and, that was mind blowing too, man. And, both of those bands were great bands. And I saw them and Fear, I think, was a little more musically advanced, and they had some brutal riffs on that record. The record, I don't know if it was reflective, of their live shows, but, and there were some hits, man. There's hits on both of them, and it's not anything that I, wouldn't listen to, but, again, it's just, the lyrics are a turn off for me.
Yeah, but in fairness, it is really rude to like try to stack people up to Darby Crash's like epic poetry.
That's true, right?
You're talking apex lyric writing.
This is true. Yes. I know that standard was set that, I don't know if anybody's come close to that, since. But that was kind of the standard that I was, and anyways, I liked more like, serious stuff and, I take myself real seriously. And so, like the Social D and, the Black Flag stuff, the Germs, the ex Los Angeles, those were heavy records, man, to me. And this stuff was fun, but it was like, a sugary snack, didn't really have any sort of, nutritional value, I guess. And I'm not talking shit on these, they definitely have their place in the history of LA punk, and these guys are my peers, but I remember the time just being like, not really into it,
Well, I think that's fair. You are arguing that this is a good matchup, that we put these two against each other.
They're great. And they're different sides, it's like the Samoans is just straightforward, you can hear a lot of bands that come from that, the Fear's not, it's not so easy to trace, what's that fucking song on there? Look it up.
Let's have a war. I'm just going to name them all. Beef Bologna, Camarillo. I'm just kidding.
Here, wait. No. I got
New
it
York's
right
all right
here.
if you like saxophones.
Well, the drum beat on the Fear is wild, right? Like what is doing that
Foreign
before?
Policy, Camarillo.
Yeah.
Those are like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
Those are good tunes.
But Brad, when Zach asked you earlier about if there was that thing that happened between punk and hardcore, would you say that both of these records would fall into that thing in between?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I do. Yeah, because they were both first wavers, kind of. Tail end of the first wave. And I agree with that statement that they were both bridges as well. From the old to the new.
See, Brad subscribes to 1.5 theory, Zach. Sorry. That's what I call all that stuff.
Yeah, but couldn't it just be considered hardcore punk, Brad?
Well, it depends on that has multiple definitions. Even in the early days, right?
Right.
To me, hardcore punk was out of vogue by middle class. And Minor Threat and
Sure.
Bad Brains. But I wasn't at the time when I was a kid. I hadn't even heard Minor Threat and Bad Brains yet. That's like, what? Fucking DC and New York? Fuck that shit. That was way on the other. Might as well have been on another planet. But the first stuff I heard, to me, that was hardcore was Germs and Middle Class. I don't know if anybody considers that hardcore. And Circle Jerks, right?
So if you had to put Angry Samoans and Fear versus each other, who are you taking, Brad?
Oh, geez. That's a fucked up question.
That's why we do it.
It's like, can't the coin just balance in the middle?
If you can flip it and make it bounce on the end, you can take both.
We
want to see video proof.
If I have to pick one over the other as to which is more lends itself to hardcore, I'd say the Samoans.
But which leans itself to you?
Oh, to me?
Yes.
Definitely Fear, because I don't care about you and I love living in the city. Although I think the versions that are on Decline of Western Civilization are better. Those songs, are just buried in there. They're buried in my psyche.
Yeah.
As classic fucking early hardcore. And certainly the shows were fucking brutal. And we're nothing to fuck around at. Fear show, extremely violent. But so those tunes, and I guess the Fear. If you had to pick two things that you didn't like, the Fear would be more that's a part of my makeup too. I guess.
I think that's fair.
Does that make any sense? Did I even answer
Absolutely.
that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything you say makes sense, right? Whatever's true to you is fair.
Yeah.
Ben, what's your take on this?
If Fear the record was just I Don't Care About You and I Love Living in the City, that'd be an amazing record.
Ben, isn't that a single? Isn't I Love Living in the City a single?
I Love Living in the City. Yeah, the first single, and then the B-side is Now You're Dead. Actually, I Love Living in the City might even be the B-side, or other way around. Yeah. So that almost exists.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben, what's your take on this?
Well, I made this matchup because they both came out the same year. They're both from the San Fernando Valley. They're both almost like borderline joke punk bands, but they were accepted by the actual punk community. And they're
joke punk. That was what I was looking for, Ben. Thank you. I'm not a fan.
But there were actual joke punk bands. Like, this is a joke. No one accepts this as a real punk band. And these were but these were joke punk bands that were accepted as real punk bands, whatever real means, in quotes. I'm doing air quotes with my fingers right now. What I didn't realize until now is they both have 14 tracks, but one is 10 whole minutes longer than the other, which would be the Fear album. I heard Angry Samoans first, but I saw Fear first. So both of these are really early for me. But man, first of all, the reason I know this later on, I learned this, that the reason a lot of those Fear songs sound so strange and choppy and unlike any other songs is that the songs were written around the drummer's drum exercises. So he would do these like really manic drum exercises, then there'd be like, okay, that's the verse. We'll just write chords over that. Like, no wonder like you have songs like Foreign Policy and like We Destroy the Family that are like, what the fuck are they even trying to do? And like, there's like that real choppiness, and there's also something kind of sterile about the production of the Fear record, and the guitar is like pretty low in the mix, and that makes me like the way the Samoans record sounds better. It's just more just like mid-range, punch you in the gut, fast punk, and you have like it opens with Gas Chamber, and it's just like, all right, we're going. This is it. Like it's just more my thing. I mean, I grew up on both these records, but I'm gonna have to go with Back from Samoa. I mean, I'm going to address an elephant in the room. Both these bands have homophobic lyrics. So I guess in that respect, they kind of cancel each other out. And now we're talking about everything beyond that. And
yeah, it's kind of hard to overlook listening to this stuff now.
And I don't expect anyone to overlook that either. If someone's like, fuck both these bands because they're homophobes, it's like, cool. You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
I think that's fair. It's just weird. Like when this is like early stuff you discover and it's like part of your DNA. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to put it on the pedestal because like that is pretty awkward, in like the modern way of just like being observant and like worldly of this stuff. Like that stuff is disgusting. Like it takes you out of the songs now, right? Like when I was listening to these both, I was like, ooh, like that, it like literally taints the songs. Like I wish I could just be a rocker and slam, but I can't, but like, these records are undeniable. They're like a part of the DNA of punk rock. Like you can't really pull them out.
I mean,
sorry, man.
Yeah, the standouts. I agree with Brad. I Don't Care About You, and I Love Living in the City. And I would add to that, Let's Have a War. And New York's So Right If You Like Saxophones is pretty funny. And what I didn't really notice until today is there's so much whammy bar abuse on the Fear record that, like in a pre-Slayer world, they might be like they might have be on the top of the whammy bar heap. Like,
what year did this come out?
82.
82, and it's like
so that's
wild,
not a pre-Slayer world.
That's true, but
pre-Slayer on record world, right? Because their first album comes out in 83. Is that right? I think that's right. Anyway, that's what I mean. Yes, I know Slayer was around in 82, but Show No Mercy comes out in 83. Yeah. Okay.
Dude, Jeff Hanneman was abusing whammy bars in 79, man. So check yourself, man.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Eddie Van Halen was, but I wouldn't even call that abuse because there's something musical about it. With Fear, it's just like, wow. But I mean, songs like Lights Out, like, that's how it's done. Like when I hear that, I'm like, that's how it's done. That's it. Like the sense of humor is about equal. I don't know. There's something about the Angry Samoans there's something psychedelic about it. Like, and I don't mean psychedelic like, Crimson and Clover's Strawberry Fields Forever. I mean like nuggets, like 65, 66, like American garage rock transitioning into psychedelic music. There's like, yeah.
Yeah. And the Fear is grimier.
Right.
Right. It's like grime humor and adolescence, or excuse me, Angry Samoans is like, yeah, it's just kind of weirdo, but Lights Out is undeniable.
Yeah.
Ben, keep going. Sorry.
Oh, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm gonna pick Angry Samoans, but I mean, you can't go wrong with either one of these.
Joe, what's your take?
I'm going to go with Fear the Record. Now, the Angry Samoans is certainly maybe musically blueprint for the music that I ended up loving the most. Okay. But I don't know. There's just something about the nostalgia that I have attached to Fear the Record and Fear More Beer too after that. But, the homophobia thing, you know, the Bad Brains get a lot of shit for this too, because they have stuff like that as well. Now, I don't know about the Angry Samoans. I know that Lee Ving has talked about this in interviews, like, you know, not justifying what he said, but that he recognizes that it wasn't cool then and it's not cool now, kind of thing. I don't know about the Samoan guys, and I know that the Bad Brains have had that opportunity and did not take it. At least HR didn't, and went the other direction. So, yeah.
So you're going Fear, Joe?
Fear. Yep. Fear.
Yeah, me too. I look at these two, and it's funny because, you know, Ben did the matchup, and in doing my homework, I did DI Ancient Artifacts versus Fear. It was like, oh shit, we're doing Angry Samoans? Fuck. Because like when I was doing that matchup, I was like, dude, Fear is gonna smash on DI, you know. And then I've been listening to that DI record the last couple of days. I was like, ooh, like I think DI might sneak it out because there's so much like Apex Agnew on there. It was just like, God, I can't live without it. And like, there's some slow tracks on there. Like the last slow track is like pretty long. It's like a 3-minute, but it's like, it kind of sounds like borderline Joy Division. And it's like, ooh, Agnew, like dipping in that, like, because Christian Death is like dark, but it's also, the songs aren't drony, you know, it's like, it's up tempo and dark, you know, but like, I don't know. Good God, that DI record's great. We got to talk about that soon enough. But Angry Samoans was his Fear. This Angry Samoans record is cool. I have it. I enjoy it. But it is silly, you know? And it's a little too silly for me. Although, like, they do tickle me on some shit, right? Like, they're going to get you once in a while. Like, I don't like the stupid epiphat, like, silly lyrics era either, you know? But, like, sometimes they'll get you. Like, NoFX has that song, like, it's like feeding a Tic Tac to a whale, and it, like, made me giggle. Like, oh, okay. You got me on one, you know, and this one, like, they saved Hitler's cock. Like, okay, that's pretty funny. Like, what the fuck? But Fear is just so wild. Like, that drum beat, that's like the majority of the record, the tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, is such a wild pulse. And they do some weirdo shit, like that Disconnected song. Like, just imagine being in a packed crowd, you know, in their prime. And it's like the beat stops, and he's like, disconnected, and then it kicks back in. It's just like, oh my God, you're getting smashed. You know, I don't know if you can pull this Fear record out, like what happens. Like, I just think this record is pretty important to the DNA of everything. It's so ill. It is so ill and so wild. And they just seem like, where a lot of the other bands, like what makes them special, like a lot of this early 80s shit is like kind of like the innocence of it. Like the innocence of attacking subjects that are very dark or fucked up, right? Like, especially this OC stuff, right? They're talking about kind of like the dark side of like suburbia, you know, but from like a youth point of view. And this Fear, it seems like they're adults, right? Like they seem like this is like real rock shit, you know? And I absolutely love it. It slays. Of course, like the tracks that have been singled out, like that's what's up. Can I live in a world without like I love leaving the city? I don't know. You know, like his voice is so perfect on it, you know? So I'm going Fear. That is my take. And yeah, Ben, anything you want to wrap on before we get out of here?
The other thing I'd point out about both these records is I want to say we got to get out of this place, which is an Animals cover, which is on the Fear record. And then The Time Has Come Today, which is a Chambers Brothers cover, is on the Angry Samoans record. So they have a lot in common, and they're both grown-ass men. Like, Metal Mike Saunders, the singer of the Angry Samoans, he coined the term heavy metal in 1970 when he wrote for like Cream magazine. So these guys go back a long time, and Lee Ving was also in lots of bands going all the way back to the 60s on the East Coast before punk even existed. So I think it's a worthy matchup. They have so much in common. I never even realized it until now. But you're all wrong. The Angry Samoans is a better record.
Well, Fear does have a knock because they shout out to Camarillo, but not Oxnard, which is heavy. I know it's because of Camarillo State Hospital. But, hey, I can't even say what I want to say. Even for the Patreon. Hell yeah. Joe, closing thoughts?
It was really good to hear all the the overall story today. It touched me a lot. My story that I got clean in '96, and so that means a lot to me to hear other people express that. So, yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, we were on a bit of a time limit. I was going to dig into that to see what his road to recovery was, but everyone should just buy the book, right? I'm sure it's in there in detail.
I think I'm going to do that now. So
yeah, because on the podcast we've talked about many different roads out of like taking that dark path, right? Like some people can go the NA route, it works. Some people go to rehab, it works. Some people just white knuckle it and turn to straight edge like Joe Rivas, and it works, right? So lots of ways out if you're in a dark spot, and don't get shy. You can always hit up Joe. He'll help you out, huh?
Yeah, I'm down to talk to anybody. Just buzz me.
That's what's up. Hit up Joe. If you're in a dark spot, you need a way out. I love Joe, and you should too. You already do. You all love Joe more than me, so don't play. What's up? All right, everyone.
And the name of that book, one more time, is Architects of Self-Destruction, the Brad Logan book.
Yeah, get it anywhere except Amazon, unless you live in like a small town in Siberia. Then we understand if you're ordering Amazon. It's all good. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you next Monday. Bye-bye.